I still remember the exact moment my family shattered. It was Christmas Eve, and the dining room was thick with the scent of roasted ham and cinnamon. A grand chandelier cast golden light over the table, reflecting off fine china and crystal wine glasses that had been in our family for 3 generations. My Aunt Eleanor sat at the head of the table, dignified in a deep emerald dress and a strand of large pearls around her neck. My mother Nora was to her right, nervously twisting her napkin. Across from me sat my younger sister Emma, who kept glancing at her smartphone with a smile that looked more like a grimace. And beside Emma was her fiancé Derek, perfectly styled hair and a confident posture that spoke of too many business seminars. I had been waiting for this moment for days. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out calm and clear. Aunt Eleanor, please allow me to thank you properly for the treadmill. I'll be sure to get it fixed. The knife Eleanor had been using to carve the ham struck the plate with a sharp clang that echoed through the room like a gunshot. She froze mid-motion, then slowly lifted her head. Her eyes wavered with deep confusion and an unnamed sense of dread. "A treadmill," she said, her voice low and heavy with bewilderment. "Tracy, what on earth are you talking about? I gave you $600,000. How does that turn into a treadmill?" The moment those words fell, Emma spit out the wine she had been drinking. Red liquid splashed onto her cream-colored dress, but she didn't even try to wipe it off. Her face flushed crimson as she choked, her eyes wide with pure terror. Beside her, my mother dropped her fork. It clattered uselessly against the fine porcelain, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. I tilted my head deliberately and looked at my aunt with an expression of innocent confusion. But Aunt Eleanor, what arrived at my apartment last week was definitely a broken, rusted treadmill. Maybe 15 years old, if I had to guess. The belt was torn, one of the handrails was held on with duct tape, and the whole thing smelled like a basement that had flooded at least twice. Mom handed it to me personally and said, "Aunt Eleanor worries about your health. It's a bit old, but use it gratefully." Eleanor's face went pale, then flushed with anger. She slowly placed the knife down on the table, her gaze piercing straight through my trembling mother. "Nora," she said, her voice slicing through the room like a blade of ice. "Why has my gift been swapped for a piece of junk?" My mother's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. She cast a pleading look toward Emma, but Emma was staring intently at her smartphone, her fingers moving frantically across the screen as if she could somehow delete the last 60 seconds from existence. "Well, Eleanor, that's just some kind of mistake," my mother finally managed, her voice cracking. "You know, today is Christmas Eve. Let's not get caught up in little details. Tracy must be misunderstanding something." "Little details?" Eleanor's voice rose, though she remained seated like a queen surveying traitors. $600,000 disappearing and my niece receiving a piece of junk instead, that is a little detail to you. Derek, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat and offered a polished smile. Now, Aunt Eleanor, this must be some kind of clerical error. Banks make mistakes all the time. I'll contact my personal banker tomorrow and get this sorted out. For now, let's just enjoy this wonderful meal. The ham looks incredible." I watched him with quiet amusement. Derek had no idea what was coming. None of them did. "No, Derek," I said, my voice calm but firm. "That won't be necessary." I reached into my bag, took out a thick file of documents, and placed it squarely on the table. The sound of the folder hitting the wood was soft, but everyone flinched as if I had slapped them. Whether it was a mistake or not, we can confirm that right here, right now. Aunt Eleanor, to be honest, over the past few days, there was something I simply couldn't shake. So I did a bit of my own investigation. I stood up and pulled out my tablet, swiping through the screens I had prepared days ago in the cold silence of my apartment. I watched with cold satisfaction as my mother's and sister's faces drained of color in the glow of the display. This was where my real work as a professional began. "Tracy, what is all this?" Eleanor stared sharply at the screen, but there was something else in her voice now, a note of dread, as if she already knew the answer but was afraid to hear it spoken aloud. "Aunt Eleanor, This is where your $600,000 went, I said, tapping the screen. Bank transaction records appeared, neat rows of numbers and dates that told a story far more honest than anything my family had said to my face. December 14th, 2025. You did, in fact, deposit $600,000 into my account. But just 20 hours later, at 10 a.m. on December 15th, nearly the entire amount, $599,800, was wired to an external account. And the recipient's name is sitting right here at this table. I zoomed in on the recipient field. Emma Irving. Derek, seated next to Emma, looked at her in shock. His polished composure cracked for the first time. Emma, what is this supposed to mean? That yacht? The wedding funds? You told me those were proof of your success as an influencer. You said you bought everything with legitimate earnings from your sponsorships. You showed me spreadsheets, for God's sake. Emma went pale, trembling as she dropped her gaze to her lap, unable to meet his eyes. Her fingers twisted in her dress, bunching the expensive fabric into wrinkled knots. I continued, advancing to the next slide with the detached precision of someone presenting quarterly earnings to a board of directors. Derek, it seems you were just another one of the people she deceived. Emma sold out Aunt Eleanor's trust and mine for her own luxury, and for a wedding meant only to satisfy her vanity. She even dragged her completely unsuspecting fiancé into her lies, forcing him to play along with the illusion of a successful, self-made woman. Take a look at this yacht purchase contract. I pulled up a scanned document with the marina's letterhead. The registered owner is Emma Irving. And every single payment came from the stolen $600,000 taken from my account. Derek, you were led to believe she bought that yacht with her own money, and you ended up marching along in her personal parade of vanity. The engagement ring on her finger? $30,000. The wedding venue deposit at that luxury hotel in Miami? $150,000. The custom designer dress? Another $30,000. All of it paid for with money that was never hers. No. Derek collapsed weakly back into his chair, running a hand through his perfect hair and ruining it. This can't be real. We've been together for 2 years. I thought I knew her. Emma's face twisted as she stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud crack. Stop it. Stop it right now. This is all fabricated. Anyone could forge something like this. You're a computer person, Tracy. You know how to fake documents. You're trying to frame me because you've always been jealous. Ever since we were kids, you were jealous that I was prettier, more popular, that Mom liked me better. Fabricated. I cut her off, my voice never rising above a conversational tone. Unfortunately for you, these are official logs extracted directly from the bank's mainframe, complete with encrypted authentication signatures and timestamps that would hold up in any federal court in this country. Once I begin a serious investigation, there are no numbers in this world I can't reach. That's what they pay me for, Emma. That's why governments and international banks hire me. Because I find things that people have tried very, very hard to hide. I swiped to the next slide. And this is the power of attorney that made the transfer possible. It was submitted to the bank without my knowledge or consent. With this document, Kathy Irving, our mother, was granted full control over my account. Please look at the signature at the bottom. I took out a laser pointer and indicated a single spot on the screen. At first glance, it looks like my signature. The loops match. The slant is identical. But forensic digital analysis shows it was created by digitally compositing scans of my handwriting from multiple past documents. The pen pressure is unnaturally uniform. There's none of the microscopic variation that appears when a real human hand signs a document in real time. And most importantly, there's this. I zoomed in on the signature to its maximum magnification. When I sign important legal documents, I always place an almost invisible dot at the upper right of the first letter of my first name. It's an analog security habit I've used for years to protect myself against exactly this kind of forgery. I learned to do it in college after a roommate stole my identity to open a credit card. But look closely at this signature. The dot is missing. Mom, you focused so hard on copying my handwriting that you never noticed my little security measure. My mother covered her face with both hands and began to shake violently. Her shoulders heaved, and I could hear muffled sobs escaping from between her fingers. I was only thinking about the family, she whispered, her voice muffled and broken. Emma needed a beautiful wedding. She needed a good start to her marriage. You already make more than enough money, Tracy. You have that fancy job, you travel everywhere, you don't even need that much money. I didn't think you'd notice. I thought if we just gave you that old treadmill, you'd be grateful and move on with your life, and everyone would be happy. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling something cold settle into my chest. You didn't think I'd notice? You stole $600,000 from your own daughter, $600,000, and you didn't think a cybercrime investigator would notice? Mom, that's literally what I do for a living. I track stolen money through shell companies and offshore accounts and cryptocurrency tumblers. I find money that criminals have spent millions of dollars trying to hide. And you thought you could just transfer $500,000 out of my account, forge my signature, and I would just not notice. My voice carried a chill that surprised even me. I had practiced this moment in my head 100 times, but hearing the words come out of my own mouth, I realized I sounded like a stranger. Or maybe I was finally meeting myself for the first time. And Emma, I said, turning to my sister, who was now crying so hard that mascara streaked down her cheeks in black rivers. The slide changed. On the screen appeared her glamorous Instagram posts side by side with the purchase contract for that white yacht sitting in the marina. That yacht, you bragged about online as a reward for yourself. Hard work never betrays you, you wrote. #yachtlife, #gift to meself. I checked the vessel identification number. It was purchased in full in cash the day after Aunt Eleanor transferred the money to me. Hard work never betrays you, Emma? Well, the effort you put into stealing someone else's money was certainly first-rate. I'll give you that. You put more work into the theft than you've ever put into anything in your entire life. Stop it, Tracy. Don't talk like that. Emma screamed and burst into fresh tears, collapsing back into her chair. But those tears weren't remorse. I had seen real remorse before, in the faces of clients who had been scammed, in the eyes of people who had lost everything. This was different. These were the shrieks of pure self-love, of someone watching her glittering world collapse and caring only about her own pain. You're destroying my life. Do you understand that? My wedding, my career, my engagement, everything I've worked for. The wedding venue deposit, $150,000, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken. The custom designer dress, $30,000. The prefabricated luxury resort trip to Fiji for the honeymoon, $20,000. The engagement ring, $30,000. The yacht down payment, $370,000. All paid for with the money Aunt Eleanor gave me. All of it stolen. Isn't that right, Emma? Silence fell over the room again. But this was nothing like the false calm from before. It was heavy, suffocating, with nowhere to escape and no more lies left to hide behind. Even the Christmas lights on the tree seemed to dim. Emma looked around the table desperately, searching for someone who would take her side. Her eyes landed on Derek, but he wouldn't look at her. They landed on my mother, but my mother was still hiding behind her hands. Finally, her gaze met mine, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before, genuine fear. You always had to be the smartest person in the room, didn't you? Emma whispered, her voice cracking. You couldn't just let me have this one thing. You couldn't just look the other way. You had to investigate and make a whole production out of it and humiliate me in front of everyone. What kind of sister does that? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Aunt Eleanor slowly stood up. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, but her face was filled with a depth of quiet fury I had never seen before. I had watched her negotiate million-dollar deals, had seen her destroy competitors in boardrooms, but this was different. This was personal. This was family. Nora. And Emma. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more weight than any shout. You didn't just sell my trust. You sold this family's very soul. I built this wealth through legitimate business. I worked 16-hour days for 30 years. I lost 2 marriages because I was too busy building something that would outlast me. And I gave a gift to my niece because I loved her and because I wanted to see her flourish. To steal it, to lie to me about it, to treat me like a fool, this goes far beyond anything that can be excused by the word family. Family does not do this. Family does not steal from family and then call it sharing. With trembling hands, she took out her smartphone and dialed a number. I watched her fingers press each digit with deliberate care. Police? Yes, I'd like to report a serious case of financial fraud. The amount involved is $600,000. The location is my residence. The perpetrators are sitting at this very table. Emma lunged forward, nearly tripping over her overturned chair. Aunt Eleanor, are you serious? I'm your niece. Your own blood. Calling the police. This has to be a joke, right? Please tell me this is a joke. You can't actually be doing this. Eleanor never once met Emma's eyes. This is no joke at all, she said calmly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I built what I have through honest work. And I expect the people I love to treat me with the same honesty. What you did was not a mistake. It was a calculated, deliberate crime. And crimes have consequences. His face was gray, drained of all color, and his hands were balled into fists at his sides. Derek, where are you going? Emma tried to grab his sleeve, but he shook her off as if she were something filthy, something that had crawled out from under a rock. Don't touch me. Derek's voice was low, trembling slightly with rage. Don't you ever touch me again. You make me sick. Do you understand that? You actually make me physically ill. He took a step back from her, then another. You told me you'd made a fortune through influencer sponsorships. You told me you wanted a wedding worthy of your success. You told me you wanted to start our marriage on a boat, watching the sunset, with nothing ahead of us but happiness. I was proud of you, Emma. I was proud of your ambition, of the woman I thought you were. I introduced you to my partners. I put my reputation on the line for you. And to think all of it was paid for with money stolen from your own sister. From your own flesh and blood. Were you trying to destroy my career too? No, Derek. No, that's not. I just wanted you to see the best version of me. I wanted you to be proud of me. I wanted everyone to see that I was successful and beautiful and worthy of someone like you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just got out of control. Please, Derek, please don't leave me. The best version of yourself? Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Being a thief is never the best version of anyone. A thief with a yacht and a designer dress is still just a thief. Spitting out those words, Derek grabbed his coat from the closet by the front door and headed straight for the entrance, without looking back even once. His hand paused on the doorknob for just a moment, and I saw his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. This engagement is over as of this moment, he said without turning around. I'll have my assistant send someone for my things tomorrow morning. Never appear in front of me again. If I see your face at my office or my apartment, I will call the police myself. The front door slammed shut with a deep, heavy thud that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. It was the sound of Emma's most cherished dream, her perfect engagement, her luxury wedding, her carefully curated future. Collapsing beyond any possibility of repair. Emma crumpled to the floor, wailing uncontrollably. Her cries were loud and raw, the kind of sobbing that comes from a place deeper than sadness. But even then, even as she lay on the hardwood floor in her expensive dress with mascara streaming down her face, I couldn't feel sorry for her. I wanted to. Some part of me, the part that remembered building snowmen with her in this same house when we were children, wanted to reach down and help her up. But I couldn't. The betrayal was too fresh, too complete. My mother pulled her sobbing daughter into her arms and glared at me with a face twisted in fury. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was nothing gentle in them. Tracy, are you satisfied now? Look at her. Look at what you've done. With a single word from you, your sister's life is ruined. Her engagement is over. Her career is over. Everything she's worked for gone. We're family. How could you be so cruel? $600,000 is nothing to you. You could earn it again in no time. You have that fancy job with the banks and the governments. Why couldn't you just think of it as sharing a little with your sister? Why did you have to destroy her? I looked at my mother for a long time. The woman who had raised me. The woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and had driven me to piano lessons and had stayed up with me when I was sick. And I saw a stranger. Sharing. I replied, my voice cool and unmistakable. Mom, what you did wasn't sharing. It was stealing. You stole from me. You forged my signature. You used my name without my permission. You damaged my credibility with the bank. Have you ever once thought about how many hours I've spent crawling through the digital underworld to earn that money? Have you ever once thought about the things I've seen, the people I've put away, the threats I've received? I earn every dollar I make, and I earn it honestly. But we're family. Yes, I said, cutting her off. And that's something you should have remembered before you stole from me. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't lie. You don't get to use the word family as a shield after you've used it as a weapon. Before long, the sound of sirens approached from a distance. They grew louder and louder until red and blue police lights alternately bathed the white walls of my childhood home in an eerie, flickering glow. Neighbors peeked out from windows or gathered along the sidewalk across the street, watching with naked curiosity as two uniformed officers walked up the front path and rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, the cold Christmas air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of snow. Tracy Irving, the older officer, asked. That's me. We received a report of financial fraud at this address. $600,000. That's correct, officer. The perpetrators are in the dining room. The officers stepped inside, and I watched as my mother and sister were read their rights. Emma stopped crying long enough to ask, "Am I under arrest?" in a small, childlike voice that I hardly recognized. The officer told her that yes, she was, and that she had the right to remain silent. Tracy, are you sure this is what you want? Aunt Eleanor placed a hand gently on my shoulder and asked quietly. We stood together by the Christmas tree, watching as Emma and my mother were led out the front door in handcuffs. The lights on the tree blinked steadily, indifferent to the drama unfolding around them. Eleanor's eyes held the pain of betrayal, and yet still a complicated concern for her nieces. She was hurting too. I could see it in the way her jaw was set, in the way she wouldn't quite look at me directly. Yes, Aunt Eleanor, I said. This isn't something we started. It's simply the end of the road they chose for themselves. They made a decision. Actually, they made about a dozen decisions. And now they have to live with the consequences. After that, the investigation quickly moved beyond local police and was taken over by federal authorities. Interstate wire fraud, organized identity theft, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The charges stacked up like files on a prosecutor's desk. Justice moved with a speed that surprised everyone, including me. My mother, charged as the principal offender for forging the power of attorney and orchestrating the transfer, was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. When the verdict was read, she collapsed in tears in the courtroom, her lawyer's arm around her shoulders. Her final words to me as the bailiffs led her away were, "I still love you, Tracy. I hope you know that." I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her. But love and theft don't go together, no matter how many times people try to convince themselves otherwise. Emma received 3 years of probation with a suspended sentence for conspiracy after the fact and aiding fraud. The judge told her that if she stayed out of trouble and completed 500 hours of community service, her record would eventually be sealed. But the real hell awaiting them lay outside the courtroom, in the court of public opinion. First, my father filed for divorce. The fact that his wife of more than 30 years had forged their daughter's signature to steal money, the fact that she had lied to him about it for months, completely shattered the quiet, gentle man's heart. He moved to a small apartment on the other side of town and started going to therapy for the first time in his life. When I visited him, he would sit by the window and watch the birds at the feeder and say things like, "I don't know who I married, Tracy. I really don't." Then, Emma's perfect world vanished from the digital sea. The followers she had adored on social media turned into the cruelest critics the moment the scandal broke. Her beloved yacht, her lavish wedding plans, her designer everything, all exposed as having been paid for with money stolen from her sister. Her accounts were flooded daily with vicious abuse. News outlets picked up the story, running headlines like "Influencer's Luxury Life Funded by Stolen Inheritance" and "Sister Betrayed." The $600,000 Instagram lie. Her career as an influencer collapsed entirely, to the point where she could no longer even walk down the street without someone shouting something cruel from a passing car. Several months later, when the dust had finally settled, I visited my aunt at her home. She lived in a beautiful old house on a hill, surrounded by gardens that she tended herself. We sat in her sunroom, drinking tea, watching the first flowers of spring begin to bloom. She handed me an envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, heavy in my hand. "This is a rightful gift," she said softly. "Not a replacement. Not a correction. This is what I always intended to give you. This time, go wherever you wish. Run forward with your own strength. Buy something that means something to you. Or save it. Or give it away. It's yours, Tracy. Completely and truly yours." Inside was another check for $600,000. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of it in more ways than one. With that money, I bought a small sailboat, not a yacht, nothing ostentatious or flashy. Just a sturdy, well-made vessel that I could handle on my own. I named her Resolution. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, I walked down to the marina where she was docked. The water was calm, reflecting the pale pink sky. I untied the lines, stepped aboard, and gently pushed the throttle forward. The engine hummed beneath my feet, and the boat glided out of the slip and into open water. Gripping the helm, I felt the wind catch the sails. The boat leaned slightly, then straightened, and we moved forward together, the boat and I cutting through the water toward the horizon. Since then, I have never looked back.